All right, as everybody's aware, on November 12th, 2017, investigators from the Greenfield Police Department were called to Peyton Manning's Children's Hospital for the report of an infant that arrived with multiple life-threatening injuries as a 1.5-month-old baby boy. Investigation found that the previous evening prior to the infant being transported to Peyton Manning Children's Hospital, the father, mother, and grandmother had transported the child to Hancock Regional Hospital here in Greenfield, where the baby was unresponsive. Hospital staff at Hancock Regional Hospital were able to do life-saving measures to the baby and stabilize its condition to where it could further be transported to Peyton Manning Children's Hospital by air ambulance. Medical staff at Peyton Manning Children's Hospital concluded that the baby had unexplained life-threatening injuries that were reflective of child abuse. At that time, the investigation continued, and investigators determined that the infant was in the care and custody of the parents and the grandparents at the time the injuries occurred. Fast forward to yesterday, December 11th, 4 people have been charged in connection with this case. I will let Hancock County Prosecutor Brent Eaton give you more information on those charges, and I'll follow up after him when he's done.
Thank you. First and foremost, nothing I'm going to say is intended to do anything which would impact or prevent the presumption of innocence which all defendants in the American system of justice are accorded, and so accordingly the presumption of innocence for all the defendants here is the same as would be for all other defendants, and nothing I am going to say is intended to prevent them from that presumption of innocence in any way, shape, or form. Further, the comments I'll make are going to be those things which be reflected in the probable cause affidavit. If there's a little bit more information I can provide you, I will attempt to do so, but I want to make very clear that these are allegations only at this point. The state feels that we've brought the right charges, but they are allegations at this point, and all defendants are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. We filed cases against 4 separate defendants. There are 2 adult defendants. There are 2 juvenile defendants. The 2 adult defendants were both charged in a similar fashion. There are 2 counts of level 3 neglect of a dependent resulting in serious bodily injury. Those level 3 counts are each attributable for between 3 and 16 years of incarceration. There is a level 5 count of neglect of a dependent, which as a level 5 is from 1 to 6 years of incarceration. Both adult defendants were charged in the same manner. Both adults were recently seen in the courtroom, and both adults were assigned a bond and given a trial date of January 23rd at this time. The juvenile defendants were also seen in court this afternoon. The juvenile defendants have both been charged with what would be multiple felonies if committed by an adult. The state of Indiana is pursuing waiver and has filed waiver as to both the defendants, and the court then has assigned counsel and set the matters on the juvenile defendants in the month of January. That's the nature of kind of where we stand with the procedure and the posture at this time, and I would do my best after, Matt, if there are questions that remain, we'll do our best to answer them.
At this time, the child has been released from the hospital after an investigation by the Department of Child Services. They have determined that the baby could be placed with a family member, and that's where it is at this time. I want to give a special thanks to the Hancock County Prosecutor's Office for their assistance in this case, the Department of Child Services for their investigation to make sure that the best arrangements for the child are at heart, and also the Hancock County Regional Hospital for their life-saving measures they performed on this infant when it was initially brought into the hospital, where they can stabilize it and have it transported to Peyton Manning Children's Hospital, and also to the Peyton Manning Children's Hospital for following up on that and contacting investigators so we can get involved and make sure that we look after the welfare of this child. And also to the Greenfield Investigations Division. It's been quite a toll on them. Although we are police officers, when you're dealing with a case like this, it takes your toll on you emotionally. And I'm just glad to see that all these moving parts have ensured the safety of this child and made sure that somebody stood up for the safety of this child and gave it the best possible outcome given the circumstances that we could.
I suppose if there's questions, then we'll do our best to answer them if we can do so.
Any indication of a motive why they would abuse and neglect this child?
No.
You said you filed a waiver.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on what that would be?
Sure. There's certain circumstances where there's two juvenile defendants which are charged, and in Indiana, when you're charged as a juvenile, that's technically not a crime. It's a delinquency petition is what was filed. A waiver is a document where we've asked the court to treat those juvenile defendants as if they would be adults. And so there's certain things we would have to prove at a later court hearing, and the court will then determine at that time if indeed these juvenile defendants would be treated as an adult or if they would remain in the juvenile system. As I mentioned, there is a future court date on that, and the court will hear evidence and then make a decision at that time as to what they want to do.
And why did your office want to attempt to try them as adults?
In this particular instance, given the nature of the offenses and given that it was a variety of statutory, given the statute, the things we need to meet under the statute we believe are there. And so in light of the nature of the case, plus the fact that these two particular juvenile defendants would qualify, we felt it was the appropriate remedy, and we felt appropriate in proceeding in that manner.
To either of you reading the probable cause, do you believe that the teenage father is responsible for the physical injuries to the child?
The only comment as to that would be that we filed multiple felonies against both juvenile defendants, and that we look forward to the process working through on those.
And do you have any knowledge of, does the baby have permanent brain injuries? Do we know that yet?
At this time, we don't know what the prognosis of the child's going to be just because of the young age, and we will not know what the long-term effects of the child are going to be till several years down the road just because of the early stage of development of the child. So at this time, we're not going to know the full effect of this until possibly several years down the road.
Do you know, I know the PC states that there were cigarettes, things like that laying around the baby's crib. Do you believe that drugs could play a factor in any of this?
I don't have any knowledge about the first-hand accounts of the investigation. All that I can tell you right now is that it's still currently under investigation, a follow-up investigation at this time.
So is there a chance that additional charges could be filed or more people could face charges?
There's always a possibility that's true. At the same time, we would not have moved forward if we didn't feel confident that we had the right defendants and the right charges and the right evidence. And so we filed the charges because we believed we had the right evidence, we believed we had the right defendants. And after quite a long time for the investigators to do their job, we felt we had enough and we could proceed with what we had, which is why we had the hearings we had today.
And your office also filed a no-contact order. I don't know if you're able to discuss at all, noticing just on Facebook that the parents had contact less than a week ago with this baby. Why is that important to make sure that they...
Well, in this instance, as I mentioned before, all defendants are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And so nothing I'm going to say would be designed to take away the presumption of innocence. Simultaneously, as prosecutor's office, public safety and the safety of victims in all our cases is very important to us. And in this instance, we have filed the charges we did because we felt they were supported by the evidence, and that further, because we believe in those charges, we thus believe that these defendants have committed crimes involving this very small child as a victim, and we thought that no contact order was a means by which the child could be protected.
A question for both of you. When you're working on a case where a 1-month-old has their life at risk, what kind of emotional toll does that take on you?
As the prosecutor's office, we do everything we can to look at what the evidence is and to look at what the law is and to make a decision that's firmly based upon the law and the evidence. I know, Matt and I are both parents, and so there's some cases which are easier than others. There's some cases which will keep you up a little bit more at night than what others will. That said, we always want to be professionals and do the job the very best that we can. It certainly is, whenever there's a situation like this one, it's tough. It's real tough. It's just a really, really, it's a tough situation. It's a phone call you hope you never get. That said, the professionalism of the police department was above and beyond. They did a tremendous job of looking at really tough evidence, getting evidence to us so we could bring charges that we felt was firmly supported by the evidence, and we look forward to the process going forward.
To kind of continue off this question, you guys have had quite a lot of recent cases where there have been child neglect and child abuse and things like that.
Yeah, man, if you want to speak, you can. I can take some of it too.
Yeah, there does seem to have been an uptick lately. I don't know if that's necessarily statistically proven, but it just does seem that way. I don't know if it's just gathering more coverage at this time. But yeah, there seems to have been, and that does take a toll on the officers after a while, and the investigators, but like the prosecutor said, we ultimately have a job to do, and we're going to do it, and we just have to look after each other and make sure that we're getting the emotional support that we need to get through that case. But that's how we handle it, and it does seem like there's been a lot lately, but we're going to continue to do our job and make sure that the welfare of the victims are looked after.
Yeah, really, we work really close together on these kind of cases, and we try to support each other to the best that we possibly can. To answer your question more specifically, yeah, there was the terrible murder of Zoe Wagner back in 2015, which I know today still sticks with a lot of the investigators and a lot of people involved in the law enforcement community here, because the nature of that particular homicide was particularly gruesome, and it did involve, a small child. A lot of us are young parents, and so those cases can be very challenging. Additionally, we did have other crimes involving children. After that, there was a neglect resulting in a death filed later that same year. What does happen, though, and I think this is something that the community should know, is the more you do something, the better you become at being able to do it in the future. By that, what I mean is that because we've had a number of these kind of cases, well, then the investigators have seen this type of evidence before, the prosecutors have seen this type of evidence before, and so it's something now, because if we've seen a few of them, I think that we're able to put the evidence together well and be able to put together a strong case. And so it's unfortunate that we've had that kind of evidence and we've been in that situation before, but in the past we've always responded well. The evidence we've had has been strong and good and allowed us to achieve good outcomes, and we're optimistic to the process in this particular case. Something else, and this really is true as a member of the community, is something I'm sure that Matt's also had, is now we are getting a lot more calls. I mean, and DCS gets a lot more calls for child welfare. The police department gets called for child welfare, and I think the community as a whole throughout Hancock County, really is looking out for our kids, and it really is, if they see something that may look wrong or may be troublesome, I think that we're receiving more of those calls into the system, and as a result of more of those calls kind of coming in where maybe they didn't in the past, then we're going to have then more prosecutions that will come because there's more evidence coming in, because people are more willing, to speak up if they see something that looks unusual or wrong or causes them concern.
You mentioned that the juveniles are charged with what would be multiple felonies if it was committed by an adult. Can you tell us the specific charges, or tell us anything about what the specific charge is?
At this time, in light of the fact that they are juvenile defendants, I feel comfortable in saying that they are charged with what would be multiple felonies if committed by an adult, but I do not feel comfortable going further than that.
Could you tell us if it's related to child abuse?
The charges that were filed were as a result of the incident that occurred in November that the adults are charged. It's the same set of facts that gave rise to the case against the adults.
Can you talk about the arrest? Tell us about the arrest yesterday.
The arrest yesterday happened in the afternoon. Officers from the investigation division went down there to serve arrest warrants, and the four subjects that we're talking about that were arrested were taken into custody at that time.
Protests? I mean, did that...
No protest or anything like that. So it's just service of 4 arrest warrants.
Any incidents of any animals inside the house?
There was one incident with an animal inside the house. When the officers were there to serve the arrest warrants, they had an aggressive animal that the officer had no choice but to put the dog down because it came at the officer aggressively.
But aside for that, they just...
Yep, it was a normal execution of arrest warrants.
Do you know when the baby was released from the hospital?
Oh, about a week ago.
Yeah, I don't know for sure.
The exact date, I'm sorry, I don't know the exact date. I want to say it was within the last 10 days.
Okay. And I'm sorry, you, sir, could I get your name and spelling for me?
It's Matt Holland, M-A-T-T H-O-L-L-A-N-D. I'm Deputy Chief for the Greenfield Police Department. Any other questions this time? All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We appreciate it.